Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette, and we're so glad you're with us to stay curious. We're off the ground and launched again, just like the Artemis rocket behind me on the green screen. And thankful to Selvin Trotter and Connie McDaniel are doing the Streamlabs program today because Marty had something to pull him away. So we miss our good friend, co-producer Marty Winkle, who's been here with me for 3 years. This is our 783rd episode of Stay Curious. Thanks to you watching. Born out of the pandemic, we're a part of the U.S. Space Walk of Fame Foundation, where the American Space Museum is just 3 blocks from our wonderful Spaceview Park that has over 30 astronaut handprints in bronze. And that's one of the best places to watch a launch. There were thousands of people there to watch this baby roar off the launch pad last November on a very good nominal mission. Thanks to all of these directors we're going to talk about today, folks. What do Clemson, University of Clemson, University of Alabama, and West Point have in common? Well, think about that. Well, they all graduated. Each one of them graduated a director of NASA's centers, 3 major centers, and they are all female. We're going to talk about those ladies right now. There they are right there. We've got Jody Singer is over Johnson Space Center. We've got Vanessa Wyche is over Marshall. And we've got Janet Petro here at Kennedy Space Center. And I've done my little book report to give you a little thumbnail about these fabulous ladies. All 3 of them are career space people. Vanessa was at the Food and Drug Administration for a little while, but these are our leaders of America's space centers that are taking us back to the moon, and you're going to be very proud of their backgrounds. I was when I did my little book report to share with you here on Stay Curious today. So we also, before we get going on these fabulous ladies, let me also remind you that Shuttle Fest 2 is 2 weeks from this weekend. I enlarged our big QR code there so you can hit that with your smartphone. I know Dave Stangy's whipping his out right now so he can come and fly down here from Michigan, hopefully. But it's $20 at the door, $15 if you hit the QR code, and we got a $12 box lunch for you, featuring the movie, the documentary, the Base to Space, okay? It's a beautiful documentary. Bruce Melnick, astronauts in it. We're going to feature the space art of Chris Calley. We're also going to have Doug Forrest there, and Ron Woods as artist on a panel. We've got another panel that's going to be discussing the shuttle legacy after 3 decades of changing our world, and that's going to be spearheaded by CNN's John Zarella. And we're going to have photographer extraordinaire Tom Usiak, who photographed over 60 shuttle launches. And we have got Nick Thomas, the Delaware North leader of education there at the Astronaut Encounter. So you're going to enjoy a wonderful afternoon, a Saturday whole day. We got handpicked some vendors, and we're going to have it on Stay Curious video podcast live for you to see on our YouTube channel or Facebook. Well, one little bit of history that you just can't avoid that happened today 41 years ago is Jack Lausuma on the left and Gordon Fullerton on the right landed at New Mexico at White Sands, the only time a shuttle orbiter landed in another place besides Edwards Air Force Base or Kennedy Space Center. We just went out and saw Jack today out at the Space Center. I believe he's about 87 years old. He's a frequent visitor out there. Going to show you a couple pictures of that. We lost Mr. Fullerton a few years back, but why we didn't want to miss an opportunity to share this landing extraordinaire is here's the photograph from our partner, Mark Usiak, who was out there on a very cold March 30th, 1982, 41 years ago there at White Sands, in a historic landing. They say that Columbia had gypsum sand in her until the final day she didn't come back. There's Mark's awesome photo of the landing out there, and it's friends like the Usiaks. And here are Tom on the left and Mark on the right that are great friends of our museum now. And there is Jack Lausuma, presented the launch photo that Tom took. out there. So, well, we saw Jack today, and there's Marty getting an autograph from him before he had to do something this afternoon. And there is Nick Thomas. And this is such a beautiful thing that NASA does out there. It's not NASA, slap me around. It's Delaware North, of course, on the KSC property visitor center. But Delaware North manages this, and they do a great job. It's a very clean facility. They're always painting, pressure washing, changing things. And what a way they renovated the gift shop there. There's actually the red walkway that the Apollo astronauts walk to the command module in the Saturn V as part of this display there. So there's Jack talking to Marty, getting his book's autograph there. And of course, Nick got a great picture of Jack and Nick together. And Nick, we appreciate all you do to promote the American Space Museum and our quest to preserve the birth of America's space program right here in its delivery room, Brevard County, Florida. Well, also a couple little news items. Thank you, Connie McDaniel, for sending me that Boeing's first astronaut flight has been delayed till July. Maybe you haven't had time to catch that, but they announced that it's going to be no earlier than July 21st, and that's a day after we're celebrating be the 54th anniversary of the liftoff of Apollo 11 to the moon. So that'd be a cool time to pick the liftoff there. Of course, this is the crewed Starliner of Boeing, and we've got Butch Wilmers, the commander. Suni Williams is going to fly to space. Both of them experienced shuttle people. Suni was on the International Space Station for an expedition or two. I think she was commander of one of them. So been pushed back from April to July. They're working on the parachute systems, a little important element there. And another little item in today's news, the NASA Crawler Transporter got the Guinness Book of Record Award, finally, for hauling out the largest objects on the face of the Earth. Of course, this time after it was the Saturn V rockets, now it was the Artemis II rocket that I have beautifully behind me here, was a participant in winning the Guinness Book of World Records there. About time for our Space Center to be honored with that fabulous one-of-a-kind crawler. Well, as this is a Women's History Month, and we take it seriously here at the American Space Museum to honor these type of months that come up. We just did Black History Month with our wonderful African American astronauts, and we've talked about the astronaut women who flew in space the last 2 days, 4 each day. 8 women flew in space. I'm not going to rattle them off, but I wanted to save towards the end of the month here to honor the 3 women directors of NASA centers. And doggone it if I didn't forget to download those pictures because we've been so busy today, of our Women in Space gallery, where we have, as I point over there behind the wall, we have every woman who's been orbited the Earth, 72 of them, and then some up there. And we also have a little honoring the 3 NASA directors that are all female at this current time. In fact, there were 4 NASA directors at one time. So, kicking off or ending Women's Month, we're going to feature these NASA directors that are shown here with Bill Nelson, NASA's administrator. Let me go to there. And left to right is Maria Perez, who just retired as director of NASA's Glenn Research Center in Cleveland on the shores of Lake Erie. Beside her is Vanessa Wyche, who is now the director of Johnson Space Center, and the first female and African American to do that. Jody, Janet Petro is there beside Bill Nelson, and Janet is the first woman to lead NASA at the Kennedy Space Center, and she has spent 16 years of her life transforming Kennedy Space Center with the former director Bob Cabana. We're going to talk about her in a little more detail, and that's Jody Singer, who, boy, I'd really like to know a lot about Jody. She is a Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville. She is over that multi-billion-dollar facility where they got a $4.5 billion budget and 7,000 square feet to test all those fabulous rockets out there. So there's a smiling Bill Nelson around these beautiful women there, and they are just not beautiful. These women are so well qualified. I know that they were held back by the system of male domination throughout their careers, but so that they worked hard to get where they're at. And that's something as a man I never really understood, why women aren't paid equally or treated equally since the 60s for sure. So, but let's get into this. I think it's just amazing. At one time, the 4 major centers of NASA were directed by women. All right. We can't talk about that enough. There was a big conference last year, a panel discussion. There's Pam Melroy's at the podium there on the left. She is the Associate Director of NASA. And then we also have Bob Cabana left to be the third in charge of NASA. So got the leadership in place to go back to the moon and beyond for the Artemis program. And they're the women out there talking about launching through the glass ceiling, because look at that image there. Women certainly have done that in the last 10 years in the space business. In fact, I think 1/2 of the management teams of NASA are led by women now. But let's first give you a little thumbnail book report here I've done on Marla Perez. Dr. Marla Perez was director of NASA Research Center after being 38 years in the NASA system. She retired last June. All right. For those of you who don't know, the Glenn Research Center is where they have the barometric chambers and do some awesome tests up there. We love pictures like this of our leaders mingling with their workers, the kids, and so forth. And every one of these women, I know, I've seen pictures on Facebook of them posing with their employees, and what a happy day that employee was to be standing beside Marla Perez there, or one of their kids standing beside them there, it looks like there. So next up, we're going to talk about, we wish her well. She's had a great career. What I didn't fail to mention, Mark, going backwards there, is she's the first person of Puerto Rican descent, and let alone a woman, to spearhead a NASA center. She got her bachelor's degree at the University of Puerto Rico, and then her master's of science at the University of Toledo, Ohio, just about 30 miles north of where I grew up in Findlay, Ohio. And she also went to Case Western Reserve Chemical Engineering, another great Ohio institution there. So certainly wish you well, Marla Perez, in your retirement, but I'm happy to let our Stay Curious viewers out there know a little bit about you. Next up is the Johnson Space Center Director, Vanessa Wyche, okay, and she became the director several years ago. A native of South Carolina, she earned a bachelor's of science degree at Clemson University. She's the Clemson contact, okay, I talked about at the beginning. A passionate promoter of science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. We put the A in that STEAM because we have an active STEAM program here that our director here, Karan Conklin, is quite proud of. And the A in STEAM is for art, astronomy, agriculture, astrobiology, aeronautics, maybe. Sure, that A is appropriate in STEAM, that teaching the kids things they need to know. And here's a beautiful picture of Vanessa out there at the Water Training Center, the giant tank where they've got pieces of the space station in there to practice their spacewalks. This lady has 2 outstanding leadership medals and 2 NASA Achievement Medals. She was recently elected to the National Academy of Engineering, one of the highest professional distinctions of an engineer. She joined NASA in 1989, working for the Food and Drug Administration. And today she is over 11,000 civil service contractors, employees there at Johnson Space Center. That is where, of course, the NASA astronaut training is, the mission control. She oversees the commercialization of low Earth orbit on the JSC side. Uh, and under her leadership, under Vanessa Wyche's leadership, Johnson Space Center was recognized by Forbes and Statista as the #1 best employer in the state of Texas. Can't beat that. I think it's cool that she was the Grand Marshal at the 44th Martin Luther King Day Parade celebration. That was a year ago in 22 in our nation's capital. What an honor that had to be for her. And she's paid her dues, I want to tell you that in there. As I look and see the showing one nice picture of her, she said, "How did she get into this?" I've in my book report here on these people, I pulled up some of the quotes. She said, "I started my career here over 30 years ago, and a lot has changed in terms of females and people of color being in positions of leadership. For me, it demonstrates that our country is really a great place. And being able to go from a project engineer to director of this entire center, that of course came to me because she said I was prepared. I took advantage of all the opportunities I had. And now to be here and be its director, it means a lot because I know others can now look up and look at me and say, well, if Vanessa could do that, then I can too." All right. And I love that kind of motivation as a leader because I'm sure she's a leader that'll get in there and do anything with her employees. 30 years of coming up the chain there. And, you know, what I always am impressed with about the women and many of the men astronauts that we talked to out at the Space Center is that they were prepared when their time came. And though they didn't know when that time would come, they didn't know if it was going to be, if they would ever fly in space or if they'd fly in space 6 or 7 times, like a few have. They were prepared for it, and that is the leadership role of good leaders, is to be prepared when your number's called. And there is Vanessa Wyche, a great example of that, leading us to the moon and beyond at Johnson Space Center. And here she is among women who are empowered there at the Space Center. I love looking at these pictures of our leaders with the at the awards banquets and so forth. They're so motivational because just like Vanessa Wyche says, if she could do it, anybody could do it. Well, the leader over Huntsville, Alabama, is a certain Crimson Tide. Okay. Graduate of the University of Alabama. This is one of NASA's largest installations. Of course, the Kennedy Space Center is on the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge. So let's talk a little bit about Jody Singer, who's the director of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. I've been to the Huntsville, Alabama Rocket Ranch, but I've not been to the Space Flight Center myself there. Looking forward to clicking that off my bucket list. She has an extensive 38-year NASA career that held leadership roles in all things about human spaceflight, technology, spaceflight mission programs and projects. She's been involved with the disaster commissions of Columbia and the Challenger accident. She goes back that far. She was very heavily involved in the External Tank Project Office. And I love this picture as I increase the size of it there. That, of course, is the giant-sized bust of Mr. Werner von Braun, who he and his team of German engineers ended up at Marshall Spacecraft Center. And I've been there many times. I lived in Upper East Tennessee, enjoyed visiting Chattanooga. And you want a great German meal, you go to Huntsville. They got all kinds of German restaurants there. And the most gigantic bust of Werner von Braun you're ever going to see. There's another one on the rocket ranch side there. Just to give you an idea of these women, here's something that she was honored to be at. Jody Singer, you know, a woman of impact. All right, that's what we're talking about. Women who've made a difference in their lives despite the chauvinistic and difficult hurdles that male threw at them. And I take no apology for saying that. They had a rough time in the 60s and 70s, and finally things are trying to level out there. I bet you ladies are wanting to know where she got that beautiful pink leather jacket there. Uh, well, a little bit about Jody Singer here, who I hope I have the pleasure to meet one day. Um, she's involved with every aspect of the shuttle, the reusable rockets, the external tank, and then from 2010 to 2012, she guided the retirement of the space shuttle era, which was certainly bittersweet for everybody involved in that. And she was a deputy for Shuttle Propulsion Office, and that got her into doing that part of that job there. And there she is in the control room. If you didn't know it, Marshall Space Flight Center controls everything on the space station, basically. They are meaning the science experiments and the data dumps and so forth. Um, a couple of her awards, of course, University of Alabama. She is on a leadership board of the president's cabinet there. She is one of the few women who have, or few people, period, not women, but few men or women who have received 2 presidential ranks of meritorious executive awards, the highest honor a career federal employee can get. She got it twice. All right. That just tells you what kind of leader she is. The Snoopy Award we talk about on Stay Curious is an honored award to less than 1% of the workers for NASA Corps, and she's been an honoree of that. Jody Singer also has worked on the International Space Station Life Support Systems, and has been responsible for identifying opportunities to develop and maintain partnerships with government agencies, academia, international and commercial partners. And this is the big thing of NASA at all of its centers, is bringing in the business world. All right. And we're so pleased that we've got leaders like this who have been around a long time. 38-year career leading Marshall Space Flight Center is Jody Singer. And now you know just about as much as I do about her, okay? And would love to have her on Stay Curious. And as we go down the line here, we're going to get more people. We've had some people from Johnson Space Center on Stay Curious. And this is one we'd love to have on Google Meets one time. And there she is giving out a couple of awards. And I stuck this one in there because I guess a few perks of being the leader of a space center is that you get to meet an astronaut or two, and there's moonwalker Harrison Jack Schmidt there beside her, and another shuttle astronaut over on the right, and they're giving a young lady there something that inspired her to exceed expectations and do something with her life that involves getting us off this planet as well as cleaning up this planet, is what today's space programs are all about. All right, last but not least, we're saving the best for last. Our lady here in Brevard County, who grew up in Brevard County, Janet Petro. We have tried to effort Janet on Stay Curious a few times, and her office, including her secretary, Heidi Culp, have just been so gracious and just letting us know, Mark, we're busy. We're busy, trying to get this bad boy back to the moon again, the Artemis SLS rocket. So we forgive you, but we cherish the opportunity that we can sit down and have Janet Petro in our Stay Curious studios. Again, a lady that is grassroots. She grew up in the space program. There she is during the COVID days being announced as the director. That's NASA Director Jim Bridenstine there. What a horrible time it was to be working and trying to do the Artemis program in the middle of this horrible pandemic. And yet they persevered and had a nominal mission. And then, of course, the silver lining for the American Space Museum is this program, Stay Curious, being born out of it to keep touch with our important contributors out there. So Janet grew up here in the Space Coast. Her father worked and tested, she worked on Apollo and Space Shuttle. All right. So she grew up a kind of a space brat, I would say, and what a memory she has of sitting with her father as a young girl on the family black and white TV as Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon in July 20th, 1969. And she thought at that time that space was in her DNA. And she's the West Point graduate, all right? This lady was in the second female class of West Point. And one day I'm going to ask astronaut Jim Adamson, a West Point graduate, about what she may have had to endure and face in there. What a beautiful picture of Janet Petro that one is there. Um, she is the first woman to lead NASA's Kennedy Space Center, the 11th director in a 14-year, well, now 16 years she's been out there. And she's already made her mark with the great director Bob Cabana, who was out there 12 years, and of course a four-time astronaut, Bob. Um, she helped steer the Merritt Island, Florida complex into transforming it into being used by private companies today. Leasing these launch pads to private vehicles and moving away from only government craft was the legacy of the Obama administration as far as space is concerned, and she was there at the beginning. West Point graduate in 1981. She's also earned her master's degree in business at Boston University's Metropolitan College. So I read a little Boston interview with her from the college there to get fill in some of my facts about Janet Petro. And they're quite proud of her in Boston for sure, though West Point is her first love. Like I said, she was central to transforming Kennedy's multi-user spacepoint into what we're doing today. And she had to deal with all these entities like the Federal Aviation Administration, the U.S. Air Force, all right, and then have to deal with a few billionaires along the way like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. And if you haven't been to the Space Center in a few years, you're not going to believe what it looks like around the Kennedy Visitors Complex. And you go out to Cape Canaveral Beach, and there is this gigantic launch pad being built that was Pad 36 for what I think is going to shock everybody is the New Glenn rocket when it starts taking off. Like I said, she also spent a 12-month duty at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. as a deputy administrator at KSC under Cabana. So she certainly knows a little bit about politics in NASA. And that's a good thing to know when you're dealing with such different entities in there. And but I know where she got her chops. And she worked for the Science Applications International Corp and also McDonnell Douglas Aerospace. And a couple people that have big leadership roles I know come out of McDonnell. And I think Nicole Stott is one that worked for McDonnell, but she worked for an aerospace company, and it sounds a lot like Janet Petro here. Surely she was on a lot of top secret projects. I read here that Janet was involved with the program manager for executing a classified multi-million-dollar U.S. Department of Defense program. Can you say spy versus spy? Absolutely. This lady has what it takes to lead our space center. And she was senior manager for communications and data systems there. She was last year she was honored with the Kurt Debus Award. That impresses me. That's the Businessman's and Woman's Award for Leadership by the National Space Club of Florida Committee. And on and on, she's also received the astronaut selected Silver Snoopy Award. And what I think is cool is she's in the Florida Women's Hall of Fame and was selected by former Florida Governor Rick Scott, who is now Rick Scott's a senator. Thank you, Selvin. There has had a little senior moment. Here is Janet at the Space Congress a month ago. They kind of rebranded it as SpaceCom with one of her working assistants there. She had a little fireside chat there. And basically what she talked about was this quote that I pulled out of one of the things I read on my book report here to you all is that we strive to be good partners with government and industry to provide space launch services and hosted government payload arrangements that are one, secure, two, reliable, and three, cost effective. And she has helped lead this industry effort to modernize and develop new launch techniques and technologies. And we saw one last week when the first 3D rocket was launched off Pad 16 that had not been used in over 3 decades, probably 4 decades. And the company Relativity had a beautiful first stage launch, and the second stage didn't go quite as planned, but still, what an achievement for them and for Janet Petro and her team to get Relativity out there on a pad that was owned by the armadillos and the seagrass out there, and the birds and pelicans and so forth for way, way, way too long. And Janet says this: as we embark on these endeavors, the Kennedy workforce remains focused on NASA's core values: safety, integrity, teamwork, excellence, and inclusion. Janet says, quote, we take pride in our work because NASA's mission isn't just for us, it's for the good of everyone on Earth. And isn't that the message there? There she is, some rather cell phone photos I took sitting there listening to her. And so we hope to one day bring you Janet Petro live in our studio here. But you know what? Some of you have been helping us out there with some donations, and hopefully we can buy the camera gear to maybe go out there and talk to them one time out there. And watching today, Darby Phillips Miller. Thank you, Darby. And I miss seeing you around the chamber tables. Hope things are going good for you. Hope that Cynthia Rossi's enjoyed this program. They're going out. I wanted to just show this is the culmination of this SLS rocket behind me that I photographed one twilight out there at the Meridian Complex. Is Charlie Blackwell Thompson, and there's cutting the tie off of Janet Petro, a tradition there of the launch director to wear a tie, and it cut off on their first launch, and they apparently did some of that shenanigans there with Janet out there. What a night, what a day for these people, and then what a beautiful mission. I still can't believe, a nominal mission on Artemis 1 is just incredible. So there are our 3 leaders of NASA centers, and I just call them leaders, okay? Yes, they're women, and they paid their dues, but they are our leaders. Black, white, men, women. This is the beautiful story that NASA has told for over 60 years. And I hope that Christopher Mick enjoyed that. He's a educator and NASA ambassador in Hudson, Wisconsin. Christina Smith, thank you. Doug Forrest is going to be at our Shuttle Fest as one of our artists. Carlton Bailey's and our friend and outstanding photographer. Steve Hammer, Dang Stangy, Bill Whiting. Great to see Bill out getting an autograph of Jack Lousum out there today. Tom Usiak, I said hi to Jack for you there, Tom. And he said, who? No, he didn't. He just had a big smile on his face. Robert Law's watching up there in Dundee, Scotland on his big screen TV. A new name there, Condi Manady. Thank you, Connie. Candy Manady there. Thank you for joining and staying and wanting to stay curious with us today. And I know that we've got so many of you around the world. We've got people in Australia. Scott Polk is in Tasmania, Australia. And I know Ophelia's probably watching in Normandy, France. And we just appreciate everybody around the country that enjoys a little break from the day with some space history and some interviews that we do very frequently. So thank you all for enjoying our tribute to these 3 wonderful ladies. We want to remind you of Shuttle Fest. Get your phone out, hit the QR code, get your ticket lined up for $15 and a box lunch. And we're going to release Saturday or maybe tomorrow. I'll get around to finishing our agenda of our speakers out there. So thank you, Selvin Trotter, First time for him to be behind the Streamlabs board, and Connie McDaniel. We all got through this together, and I appreciate our whole team here at the American Space Museum. As they know, I sometimes get uptight and out of sight about things going wrong at the last minute. And thank you, Marty, for your being there when we called you in there to straighten out a little anomaly we had before we went live. So, Selvin, Connie, anything we need to do to close out our program today?
Good.
Good. All right. Well, we appreciate everybody enjoying us today. I'm going to put our leaders of our space centers up there as I tell you that tomorrow we'll do another. I'm going to try to get another program together on one last look at some women leaders in the month of March when we honor women in the History Month. So thank you all for being part of Stay Curious today. I'm Mark Marquette, and I'm saying that we will bridge the space between us tomorrow when we see you again on Stay Curious.